if you were with us last time, and I introduced you at the time to two people who are kind of bigwigs in the area of memory and brain research, Henry Roediger and Judy Willis. At that time, I also probably shared with you that I'm a bit of a brain nerd. Did I tell you that I geek out on this brain stuff? Did I tell you at the time that I actually own a human brain? Did I tell you? Right? That's the joke. Brian has a brain. Actually, if we're technical about it, I own half a brain. I own a hemisphere, but that's a different joke, right? I love this brain stuff. I love learning about how the brain functions and how we can engage our students and align our practices with the way the brain works. Both Dr. Roediger, serious memory researcher, Judy Willis, who's a physician by training, we could also call her a neuroscientist by training, that this stuff works because that's how the brain kind of functions. Is when you take a quiz like that, because the brain's a bit of a prediction machine, your brain kicks in and wants to kind of fill in the gaps. It doesn't like gaps. Your brain doesn't like gaps. If you put gaps in front of your students, really good things happen to engage them. Now, there's a number of different ways you can go about engaging your students through quizzes. In this session, I'm going to share with you more strategies that you can do in two ways. When we were together last time, I shared with you 10 strategies, two ways, 10 strategies that could be used in person or online. Same one for this one. I'll share with you strategies like this that can be used when you're with three-dimensional people again, or if you remain hybrid or virtual, or some of your kids are at home. There's a number of different ways we can do that. And here is one of them. If you don't know about Mmentimeter, we're going to do this one together. It's a really easy tool and it's free. And if you were to use this site, there's a number of different ways you can do the quiz and interactive feature. And you can do this live in front of kids as well. If they have devices, you can do this virtually. You can even have kids team up to do these kinds of things. There's a number of different kinds of questions you can ask. We did multiple choice and we did the word cloud as well. And it gets even better. There are actually presentations you can create. Side note, I don't get any money for promoting this website. I just think it's cool because it's easy to use. I'm all about easy. When I'm kind of trying to figure out new stuff, the easier, the better. The free version allows you to do 2 slides per presentation that have some sort of interactive element. Those were the ones that have the interactive element. But you have unlimited content slides. These are the content slides. You can think of those a little like a PowerPoint presentation. You can actually create it in Menti or Mmentimeter, and then you can mesh together interactives with content like you would maybe do on a PowerPoint. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you on this is if you do the free version, I believe they only keep your content for 2 or 3 days before it wipes it out and you have to start over. So when I use Menti or Mmentimeter, I set it up the day before I'm intending to use it. Just a way to go about utilizing something like a quiz. For those of you who like to see some sort of an agenda for these kind of sessions, here's what we're going to tackle. I'm going to share with you one really big brain idea. That's the concept of context dependency. And then along the way, I'm going to share with you some more strategies and cool tech tools. We've already tackled 2 of those, using quizzes to engage students and pull them in to get them to go from one of these to one of these. And Mentimeter or Menti is just an easy way to do it. There's Kahoot, there's Quizlet, there's tons of them out there that are really good. Mentimeter is just a good, free, easy one to use. Like I said earlier, let's make the best use of our time and keep going. We're going to talk about this concept of context dependency for just a moment. I'm curious if anything like this has ever happened to you. We're going to geek out on brain stuff for just a moment. Curious if anything like this has ever happened to you. You meet someone for the very first time, and you shake hands. Back when you were allowed to shake hands with people, you shake hands and you interact. Maybe you have a 3 or 4 or 5-minute conversation and you exchange names and pleasantries and what they do and what you do, find out you have some things in common. You're enjoying the conversation. Then it's time to split and go your way. And as you're about to leave, you start walking away. You look over your shoulder and you think to yourself, what was her name again? Has that ever happened to you? You forget names really, really quickly. I see some of you are nodding. If you find yourself forgetting names pretty quickly, it doesn't mean you have dementia or you're getting old. I mean, you might, I don't know. But we actually kind of know why that is. I'll tell you why that is here in just a moment. Curious if this has ever happened to you. Imagine that you're just at home, you're sitting on the couch and you're reading a book. You remember that thing called reading for pleasure, right? Occasionally you get time to do that. So you're sitting on the couch, you're reading for pleasure. You're enjoying it, and then something pops into your brain that you have to go to your bedroom to get something. So you get up off the couch, you walk through the kitchen, you go around down the hall, and you go into your bedroom and you do one of these. You walk into the bedroom, put your hands on your hips, it's like, wait, what was I going to get? Does that ever happen to you too? Yeah. Are you saying, Bryan, you're saying, do you have cameras in my house? This is weird. We know why that is. They both have to do with a concept called context dependency. Because memory, this is a bit simplistic, but this is true. Your brain was designed to take a bundle of experiences, we call that context, and attach the new learning to it. Let's go back and elaborate on this. When you learn someone or you meet someone for the first time and you interact and exchange pleasantries and names, right? There's a lot of contextual pieces to that conversation. And the person's name isn't really the most important piece of context. What is more important is, did you feel safe in their environment? Did you enjoy their company? Could that be a person who might help you out if you ever need it? And most of us have pretty normal names, pretty common, I guess I should say, common names. Barbara and Bryan are pretty common names. There's nothing overly special about our names, but there is some other things that are special about us. Our brains tend to cue into things that are important and related to survival, especially in those pieces of context. Now let's go back to the couch thing. You know the context dependency thing matters, even if you've never heard that term before. You know it matters, and here's why. So you're standing in your bedroom, hands on your hips, you're thinking, man, I'm just losing it. So you decide to go back to the couch and sit and start reading a book again, and within 30 seconds, what happens?
You remember it.
Exactly. You think, oh, that was what I was supposed to get. Why? Because the context, or the condition is another way to say it, the condition in which you thought about it in the first place is now the same. See, when you get up off the couch and you go through the kitchen and around the corner and down the hall, the context, the condition, the situation changes. For example, you go from being sedentary to moving. That's a conditional change or a context change. Your physical environment changes. You go from being on the couch to standing in an entirely different room. Some researchers call it the doorway theory, because you go through several doorways to get to a new context. And when you do that, your brain shifts. You get back to the original context or the original condition of thinking about it, and you start to remember things. Really interesting ideas related to context dependency. Here is one of our first really important takeaways. The big idea is the power of context when it comes to engagement and learning. These ideas of context dependency been around for many, many years. So let me elaborate on what this might look like in the classroom. See, the brain was designed to take a bundle of experiences. We call that context. What are those experiences? Things like who I'm with, how I'm physically feeling, the time of the day. For example, some of you right now, your context is you're a bit tired. That's part of your context, is how you feel. Part of my context is my prior knowledge. Part of my context is the physical environment I'm in, who I'm with. Part of my context is how much sleep I got last night. Part of my context is the food I ate, the time of the day. There's dozens of pieces of context. It turns out your brain was designed to take these experiences and then this new learning and smack them together. That's what the brain was just designed to do. When we're teaching and leading students, when we're trying to get them to remember things, when we match the original encoding with the way we're trying to assess or gauge their knowledge, the better off they are. Like sitting on the couch versus standing in your bedroom. The context changes changes significantly, and so goes our ability to remember that information. It's not that you're losing it, that's just the way your brain was designed. Here's what it looks like in the classroom. For years, I was a middle school language arts and social studies teacher. Imagine I stand up in front of my classroom and I say, good morning, everyone. Welcome to class. As you know, every day we read a chapter from our favorite book, A Day No Pigs Would Die by Robert Peck. Before we start chapter 7 today, who remembers what happened yesterday in chapter 6? If I ask that question, you know what's going to happen. One of these, don't call on me, don't call on me, don't call on me. It's hard to remember absent of context, because I just asked them cold call. Who remembers what happened in the chapter yesterday? See, a cold call like that is really hard. The brain's designed to take that information, the stuff that happened in chapter 6, and attach them to experiences that we call context. Now, there are some people in your life who are really good at remembering stuff absent of context, and they go on game shows and win a lot of money. That's not most of us. But back to the classroom. Imagine I were to do something like this instead. I say, students, good morning. Welcome. As you know, every day we're reading a chapter of our favorite book, A Day No Pigs Would Die. Before we jump into chapter 7, I have a couple questions for you. First, do you remember that about midway through class yesterday, I stopped the lesson and I showed you a short YouTube video clip? Raise your hand if you remember watching the YouTube video clip. Now, keep in mind, I'm not asking them what they learned or what the video clip was about. I'm asking them to remember an experience. Do you remember watching the video? And they're going to go, yeah, well, yeah, I remember watching the video, because remembering experiences is a lot easier than remembering stuff. But the brain was designed to take the stuff and attach them to experiences. Then I go on and I say, students, thank you very much. Put your hands down. How many of you remember right after we watched that video clip, I had you do a quick write? I gave everybody a 3x5 card and we did a quick write. Raise your hand if you remember doing the quick write. Remember, I'm not asking them to remember what the quick write was about, but just doing it. I say, cool. And lastly, one more question for you. After you did the quick write, I had you pair up with 2 people around you and you had a brief discussion. Point to the person, if they're in the room, that you talked to yesterday during that discussion. So they'll do one of these. Oh, yeah, over here. Yep, we did that. Then I might say, just curious, real quick, before we jump into chapter 7, what were some of the significant events that happened yesterday in chapter 6? Then you'll see students start to volunteer and say, oh, I kind of remember that stuff. Because what I'm doing is asking them to remember experiences. And with those experiences come the content. This idea goes back decades in the research and has huge, massive implications for how we engage students, how we assess students, how we have them even take standardized tests. We'll get into that here in just a moment. Let's continue this discussion. The original studies were done on scuba divers, of all people. And this is what they found. Is they took scuba divers and they asked them to memorize a list of words. We've all taken those tests, like here's 20 words, memorize them kind of thing. And then they either matched or mismatched the context of recall. If I learn the words on land and I'm asked to recall on land, I do pretty well. If I learn words on land, but then I'm put underwater and I'm asked to recall underwater, I don't do as well because the context is different. Do I do 0? No, I can actually remember some when the context is mismatched, but not as much as when I match the context. If I learn on land, recall on land, pretty good. Learn underwater, recall underwater, pretty good. Mismatch them, not so good. And you can see the same information is just graphed out for you there on the right. Turns out this idea has massive implications for things like how we test or assess our kids. Here's an example. I was an elementary school principal for a couple of years, and we did DIBELS testing for our kids. You know what DIBELS testing is? Have you heard that before? Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy. It's basically a literacy / reading / language assessment that can gauge how kids are progressing. This is what happens. So let's take a kindergartner, a 5-year-old. When that 5-year-old was at my school and they were learning language concepts, they would learn it in the context of the classroom. Teacher sitting on the floor with a big book, behind the table lessons, sitting on the floor, talking with other kids, drawing stuff out. Those are language experiences for kids in a kindergarten classroom. But when it came time to dibble, it's a horrible way to say it, but we dibbled kids, gave them the test. This is what would happen. Somebody would come in from outside the classroom usually with a clipboard. Some of you know this, how this is going. And they'll say something like, okay, I need to see Maria now. Where's Maria? Okay, come with me, sweetheart. And then that person who's loving and kind and gentle, it's often an academic coach or a paraprofessional, says, we're going to go down here. We're going to go to another room and we're going to take a quick test. It's going to be super easy, right? So you're positive and encouraging to the kid. And so the paraprofessional or the academic coach takes the child by the hand around the corner, down the hall, into another classroom or another room where there's sometimes a stranger sitting on the other side of the table with a clipboard and a stopwatch. And then they give them the test. And then the kid goes back after 3 or 4 minutes, and then another kid comes in. What often happens, I saw this over and over, is the teacher would look at the results of that DIBELS test and say, wait a minute, that's not right. She knows this stuff. and then they assume it's the fault of the assessment, Dibbles is actually quite valid. It's not a matter of the test, it's a matter of the context. Because I'm asked to my kids are being assessed in a very different context in which they're learning it. Another classroom example. So let's say you're a second grade teacher. Now let's go first. First grade teacher, and you're teaching your kids some fraction concepts, half, whole, third, so on. And so what you do is you get the bucket of manipulatives and you throw them out on the table. And then you're teaching the kids via manipulatives, say, show me half, show me third, show me whole. And you're thinking, my kids got it. This is amazing. They're going to do fabulous. And then when it comes time for the test or the assessment, what do? We take the manipulatives away and we give them a paper and pencil test. I'm not saying paper and pencil tests are invalid, but see how the context is so mismatched? The takeaway is this. Let me go back one. When we match the context of the encoding with the way students are asked to recall the information, they tend to actually do pretty well. That's the good news. This is part of our big idea when it comes to engaging students and assessing, engaging knowledge, and helping them remember content. Context rules. One more example, and then we'll go on and talk more strategies, and we'll figure out how to make sense of this and how this is important for you, or how this might be important for you. When my oldest son was in high school, he went to a large suburban high school, a couple thousand kids. When he was a 10th grader, he had to take the state standardized test. Every state has a standardized test. Kids have to pass them to graduate, of course. So when it came time to take the state standardized test, they took all the sophomores in the whole school, all 350 or 400 of them, shuffled them down into the cafeteria at the long, skinny cafeteria tables, and then proctored the exam in the cafeteria. So what's wrong with that? Well, it's pretty efficient. It's an efficient way to do it, but it's not aligned with the way the brain functions. Because if you take a look at, for example, the way Andrew was learning math at the time, he learned math in a classroom, talking, listening to his teacher, talking with his peers, using a little bit of technology, solving problems, getting feedback. What do you do when you're in the cafeteria? You goof off and you play with you goof off and you play and you hang out with your friends. Mismatch the environment. This is why you never ask a substitute teacher to give a test. This is why you're very careful when you're assessing kids' knowledge, make sure that the context is aligned and they actually do pretty well. So what do we do about this? First of all, here's an application in the real world. This is something that I actually do in my real life. You see notes, my personal notes that I took to a workshop I attended about 5 years ago. First, take a look at the right-hand picture in the upper right where you see my scribbles. You see the date, you see where I was, ADE Phoenix, Arizona Department of Education in Phoenix. We were on the 16th floor in room 104, 40 people. There were 2 trainers, Deb and Barb. What I did in that case, and I do this often, is when I'm taking notes and trying to learn something, I add contextual pieces of information, because my brain was designed to take all that stuff I'm about to learn in the workshop and attach it to the context or the environment or the condition. Now, let me get a little bit vulnerable with you. 2 trainers, Deb and Barb, were wonderful. They were teaching concepts related to ACEs and SEL. And so I was beginning to learn about these things. I knew a little bit. I wanted to learn more. Well, at one point, one of the trainers started talking about the brain. And that piqued my interest because I've been in this world of brain-based learning for about 20 years. I'm deeply into this stuff. I've been doing brain stuff for a long time. So then one of the trainers started talking about the cerebellum, and she pointed right here. She said, you know, the cerebellum, the part of your brain right here that does blah, blah, blah. If you know anything about your brain, you know the cerebellum's not here, it's back here. She screwed up. And you can see on my notes that it was a little frustrating. You see my words there in the bottom right? A little frustrating. Why did I put that? Because I was trying to pick on Barb? No, but because I had to acknowledge that my irritation, my mood was now, guess what? Part of my context or part of my experience. In that case, what I tried to do was say, okay, we all screw up. Bryan, you've made far worse mistakes than that. No big deal. She just messed up. You can live with it. Move on. I talked myself through it. But the mood is now part of the context. In the classroom and when we're working with engaging kids in both environments, what might we do about this? Remember this key idea. Here's the key, most important takeaway of our entire time together. Match the retrieval, the way you're assessing or asking kids to retrieve information, with the way it originally went in. The way it went in is probably the way it should come out. Now, there are ways you can get your kids to transfer. Of course, transfer is important, but this is important to know that the brain was just designed to do this. Those bundle of experiences, who I'm with, time of the day, how I'm feeling, prior knowledge, all those things matter. And then I take the new stuff, bam, smack them together. That's the big idea. So how do we overcome too much dependency on context? There's 3 easy steps. Step number 1, just go slow to go fast. Does it take more time to stand up in front of your kids and do the setup? Absolutely. Will you get better results? Undoubtedly. So go slow to go fast. First, set up the experiences, then ask for recall. Number 2, VARY, vary the context. I'll show you a strategy in just a moment. The reason you vary the context is so that the learning isn't stuck in one singular context. So kids need to interact with the ideas and be engaged in the ideas in a lot of different contexts. In your classroom, in the hall, at home, while they're riding the bus, with lots of different people, not just the shoulder partner next to them. In a lot of different modalities, I need to look at it, I need to write about it, I need to think about it, I need to talk about it. Lots of different ways to express my knowledge. Vary the context. And then number 3 is just a reminder for us to pre-plan that process. Plan the questions and prompts you'll use. Here's one way you might go about doing it. Here's a way to vary the context. In order to do this one, everybody please stand up for just a moment. Everybody stand up. I will do the same as I adjust my camera real quickly there. Everybody stand up. Now, standing is good because sitting for too long is not good for the brain. We already know that's important, that movement matters quite a bit. But here's one way to vary the context in the classroom and engage students, is to ask them to change their perspective. What I just asked you to do was merely stand up. You're now looking at your camera or your desk or your computer from a slightly different angle. Previously, I was kind of down here. Now I'm up here. Previously, you were sitting. Now you have a little bit more energy and oxygen in the room. In the classroom, this is what I often ask kids to do. I say, students, we're going to do a quick stretching activity. Everybody stand up. They stand up. We stretch for just a second. I say, here's your task. In just a moment when I say go, you're going to find another seat in the classroom to sit in, another person's desk. When you get there, don't mess with their stuff. Don't touch anything. Your bottom goes in the seat. That's all you do. Ready, set, go. So they go and find another place in the classroom. Then once you've changed their context, it's still within the classroom, but the physical location in which they're viewing the front of the room has changed. Then I might go back and do something like this. Students, as you recall, we were just talking about the power of context dependency. And then I do a quick, maybe 30-second review. What I'm doing in that case is I'm varying VARY, the context in this case, what they're with, where their physical body is, who they might be next to, the way they're looking at the front of the classroom. All of these things matter. It's just an easy way to go about varying the context, is just change their perspective in the classroom. So change the perspective. Here is an insider tip that I actually got from a teacher a number of years ago that used to work for me. I shared this strategy with her, and she said, Bryan, my kids love this strategy, but she was a 3rd grade teacher. She said they would often dawdle or take their time when we were done. And most change the perspectives take like 5 minutes, not very long. When it's time, she said, Sarah told me, when it's time for them to go back to their seats, they would dawdle, they'd take too much time, they'd meander. So this is what Sarah told me she did. She said, students, right before you go back to your original seat, I've given each one of you a Post-it note on that desk. Here's your job. Write a kudo, a thank you, a kind note to the person whose desk you're currently sitting in. She had to model this, of course, for her kids. She said, it could be something like, thanks for holding the door for me yesterday, or your new shoes look pretty cool, where'd you get them? Or you're the best tetherball player in the whole school. Leave them a note, a nice note. She said, as soon as we started doing that, kids would race back to their desk because they had something kind of build culture, some kind of kudo, some kind of nice thing for them to look forward to. Really, really nice tool. All right, let's dig into this idea. It's processing time. It's audience participation time. Here's what we're going to do. Please locate a pen or a pencil, something to write with, as well as something to write on. Scrap piece of paper works, full sheet of paper works. If you even wanted to do this in On your computer, you could certainly do that as well. Here's the task. I'm going to pick up my phone and set the timer. And your task is to do a quick write, a fast write version of quick write. Let me set this up for you, then I'll set the timer and let you loose. You can see the prompt at the left-hand side of the page there. Fast writing is this. When I tell you to start, don't stop. Just pick up and keep writing. If you get stuck, just write, I'm stuck and I don't know what to write about. If you're still stuck after that, say, I'm still stuck and I still don't know what to write about. When the timer's going, don't worry about things like spelling or grammar or punctuation. Just write like crazy. Write like your fingers are on fire. That's the statement, right? Based on what I've shared with you about the concept of context dependency, so what does it mean for you? What might you do with this information? And so forth. All right, here you go. It's audience participation time, 3 minutes. Ready, set, go. As you finish up, go ahead and take a look at the screen. You might notice your screen looks a little bit different. I've stepped out of PowerPoint for just a moment and I'm on, well, let's stop that. That's the timer that just went off. We'll pause that. I'm on a website called classroomscreen.com. Give me a thumbs up if you can see Classroom Screen. Is it there? Thank you very much. This is your next super easy tech tool that is great for online or in person or hybrid sessions. And guess what? Just like everything else, it's free. Like most things, there's an upgraded version. If you have lots of money that you like to spend, then you can do the upgraded stuff. But Classroom Screen is so cool. Let me give you a quick preview if you've never seen it before. Up on the screen, you see several different things. For example, you see I can move these things. These are all movable. And down here at the bottom, you see this bar at the bottom. There are different things that I can put in there. For example, the text, I can change this. I can adjust this size of the font. I can put whatever I want. In this case, I just did the same exact fast writing prompt for you. I can move it around. I could even get rid of it. I can choose a bit different background if I want. Let's say we want to go there instead. We're looking at the London Bridge or the Tower Bridge in London. In here, we just have the timer. This is one of my favorite tools on Classroom Screen is I can do different icons to tell them how I expect you to interact with each other. So this one's a whisper. This one's ask a neighbor. This one's work together. This one's silent. I can do the stoplight thing. Then I can do the stopwatch, the calendar. I can draw things. I can insert pictures, amazing, cool things. And here's the even better thing about it, besides the fact that it's free and it's really easy to use, is you don't have to download anything. It's all web-based. So you just go to classroomscreen.com. There'll be a green bar that says launch Classroom Screen, and it brings this up immediately. That's all you do. Now, of course, you have to redo it every day. If you wanted to reuse things day to day, you have to pay for it, but you just redo it every day. It's super simple. I'm thinking all kinds of really cool applications for our kids with something like that. So fast writing was our second strategy. Our second tech tool was something like classroomscreen.com, which is great when you're in person. And it's also really good when you're in a hybrid learning environment as well. Here's your next super easy engagement tool that is surprisingly simple. And we're going to do this one together as well, utilizing the chat feature. If we've not yet used the chat feature, but we're going to do that right now. This or that in the chat feature, which is most appealing, which are you most aligned to, which do you like just a little bit better? Go ahead and put in the chat feature. Do you like Hocus Pocus or Harry Potter? I just noticed this the other day that they both start with HP. Is that weird? Is that a coincidence? I don't know. So what do you think? Which one is you put Hocus Pocus or Harry Potter? Go ahead and put that in the chat feature. This is super simple. So in some ways, it's not really like a super advanced engagement strategy, but a whole number of different things you can then jump off to talk to your kids or to share concepts or discussion points or writing points, all sorts of different ways you can do that. And for those of you who might be in any sort of asynchronous environment, what that means is some of your kids are at home and some of them are in person. A lot of us are challenged, like, how do we figure that one out? This is something that's really easy because the kids in front of me, I might have them turn to their partner and talk. The kids who are at home, they can do it in the chat feature, and I can kind of monitor both at the same time. Let's do another with this or that. Which one is more appealing to you, Thanksgiving or Halloween? Which are you more aligned to? Or which one do you like a little bit more, Thanksgiving or Halloween? This or that, super easy strategy, really helpful as well. And there's even one variation. You don't have this in your handouts if you downloaded or have the handouts in front of you. This one I just added because I found it on Twitter and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So I stole it from Esther Lindstrom and she posted it on her Twitter accounts. So let's not do this one because I maybe don't want to know the answers. I don't want a whole bunch of 8s to pop on the screen. Or maybe I do, I don't know. But you could do something like that with your kids as well on a cat scale of cat. How are you feeling today? There's all sorts of funny memes and kind of things out there that you can chat with, that you can use to engage your students. Again, in person, online, they work fairly well as in both settings. Before we continue, a couple tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that work both in person and online to engage our students. One is to utilize lots and lots of icons. You'll notice a couple of icons that have come your way. When I wanted you to use the chat feature, I put the chat icon on the screen. When there was a strategy, I put the strategy icon on the screen, although I didn't really talk about that one as much. When there's an opportunity for you to kind of engage, what I might call audience participation time, I put icons on the screen. Even if I'm up in front of kids live, I still do icons. Why do we do this? They're really good nonverbal cues to the students that if they see an icon, this dialogue bubbles, that's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to talk here pretty soon. Or coming up is an opportunity where I have to talk. It's also really good at helping keep me on track, keep the teacher on track. Because as I plan a lesson or as I plan a learning situation for my students, there are times when you need to pause what you're doing and have them chunk and chew. You chunk a little bit of information, have them chew on it. Using icons in your presentation is a good way to keep you on track so that you don't go too long without giving your students an opportunity to chew on those ideas. So a tip and trick, an insider tip, use lots and lots of icons like those. Train your kids on what they mean, and then force yourself to put them into your presentations or in your lessons, and it keeps you on track as well. Another insider trick is to use lots of timers. Now, I did skip over one slide where we had a timer put in there, and that's just because we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to be respectful of your time at the end of a long day. And that is use lots of timers. A couple of different ways you can go about timers. We can do them on something like classroomscreen.com. That's good. Classroomscreen.com is a great way to use it. Let me admit someone here real quick. There we go. Classroomscreen.com has built-in timers. I love timers that are visual in nature. So kids can look occasionally up and kind of gauge how much time they have left. You can go to YouTube. The swing set countdown timer you see there on the left, you can just get that on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called Mr. Timer that has tons and tons of really good timers. Some of them are just timers alone. Some of them have some upbeat music to go with them. Some of them are visually pretty appealing. Use lots of timers. Again, those help keep you on track, but they're also good indicators to your students about how much time they have to tackle a specific task. Too often in my background, too often when I was teaching, I'd say, okay, students, ready, go, you have 5 minutes. And then like 30 seconds later, I'd interrupt them. Or I'd say, you have 5 minutes on this task, and then it'd be like 25 minutes because I wasn't very good at tracking time, or I got sidetracked or something else came up. Timers are a great way to go. They're guidelines, of course, but timers are really nice tools. One more insider tip, and then we'll talk about the last strategy of our time together. And one more tech tool. How are we doing on time? We're doing all right on time. One more tech tool after this as well. Your next strategy, or your next tip rather, it's a strategy, is to conduct something we might call a course evaluation. And you can do this both electronic, as in an electronic format like SurveyMonkey, or with pen and paper. Here's what you do. You stand up in front of your kids and you merely say something like this. Again, this can be done virtually or in person. You stand up in front of your students and you say, you know what? I think I'm a pretty good teacher. And if it was me, I'd be a little goofy and say, you know what? I know I'm a pretty good teacher, but I want to get better. And I need your help to help me get better. Side note before I continue. Keep in mind, like when you take a master's class or you go to a workshop, at the end of the class, the end of the workshop, they give you evaluations, right? Those evaluations are intended to go to the instructor in order to help the instructor improve. We're used to giving feedback about the quality of a session we attend, but we don't often allow our students that same privilege. That's what we're doing in this case, is we're offering our students the chance to give us feedback about our course. So I stand up in front of my students and I say, you know what? I think I'm a pretty good teacher, but I want to get better. I need your help to help me get better. Here's what's going to happen. In just a moment, I'm going to give you a survey link. There's 5 questions on that survey, or I might give them in pen or paper. It doesn't matter. You can do it either way. There's 5, 6, 10 questions on this survey. You're going to rank these questions on a scale of 1 to 5. Little kids, you could do a smiley face scale. And you ask them questions such as these. These are just examples. You'll give some thought in just a moment to questions that you would really like to ask your kids. And I just say, you know what? I need feedback on how to get better. So then I hand it out. I say, these are anonymous surveys. Don't put your name on it. I don't want to know individual results. I want to know group results. Then you give them the survey. You collect the survey. You crunch all the numbers and you learn what you can learn. Now let's go one level deeper on this because this is pretty good. So imagine I do that. I stand up in front of my 7th graders and I say, please help me get better. Be honest, but be kind. Give me feedback. Then I take home all the data and I crunch the numbers together. 2 or 3 days later, I come back in front of my kids and say, students, by the way, you remember the other day where I asked you to give me some feedback? Here are the results. And I actually display the results in front of all of my kids. I'm ripping my soul open. Not a lot of teachers do that, do they? Think about how you're modeling this to your kids. Think about the power of openness and feedback you're modeling to your kids when we're saying, here's what the results are. Here's what I learned. Side note about that. Let's say I take third question on the screen. The lessons and activities are fun. Let's say I get a low rating in lessons and activities are fun. Let's say I get like a 3.1 average, pretty low, pretty average to low. I would not go in front of my students and do what I probably am thinking. This is probably what I'm probably thinking. I'm probably thinking, well, if you guys would just behave better, we could do more fun stuff. But I don't say that. I show them the results and I say this. I can tell based on the survey results that having fun is really important to you guys. So let's talk about how we go about having more fun activities. That's different than you guys behave better, we can do more fun stuff. That sounds manipulative, but it allows me to learn. Okay, let me pause for just a moment. Take about 30 seconds and ask yourself this question. What kind of questions would I want to ask my own students? Pause for just a moment, maybe even jot down some ideas. What kind of questions would you want to ask your own students? Give it a shot, 30 seconds of processing and think time just on your own. So I just made an executive decision. We only have a couple minutes left and I want to respect your time. I'm going to take this strategy and put it into next week's session because it fits in pretty well there. And I want to share with you one last tech tool that is super cool, super easy to use and works both in person and online. It's called EdPuzzle. EdPuzzle allows you to take a video clip from anywhere on the web. You just put in the URL and then add interactive elements embedded into the video. Questions, prompts that students can't move beyond until they interact with it. So what I did was took one of the most wonderful TED Talks ever by Rita Pearson. Many of you know who Rita is. She unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but she was one of the bright spots in our profession, a very popular TED Talk, and I embedded a couple questions along the way. If you look at the screen, you see in the bottom there where I have the hand over and there's a little circle. What I've done is I've embedded questions that come as a result of something in the video. In this case, I put the question, according to Rita, what are some of the reasons kids don't learn? And then I would type in my answer. And we might say something like family support or lack of family support. And then I put in my answer and I submit, and then the video continues.
One of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss.
And then I can go on, and in this case, kids don't, and that was an open-ended question. In this case, I just did multiple choice. In this case, we say the correct answer is that one. Kids Don't learn from teachers they don't like, submit, and the video continues. And then this is just an elaboration. What is so cool about EdPuzzle is you can take any video clip. By the way, it's free. That's cool. And then you decide what questions you want to put or what prompts you want to put in the video. We do this all the time. I found myself as a teacher doing this all the time as well. We show a video clip, and in our notes or somewhere we say, okay, stop at minute 3, at the 3rd minute, 17 second, and ask this question. This has you do all that planning ahead of time. And kids can watch it individually, so kids can do it at home. And what's so cool about it is you see right here on the screen, it says the skip button. You can take that out, and you can require kids to answer the question before they watch the video or before they continue the video. Isn't that amazing? Very, very cool. Very, very interesting. A lot of fun tool. And it's free, easy to use. It'll take you moments to set up. You watch a video, then you embed questions or prompts or interactive features right there in each one of them.